boys and girls. Well, I've just been out in the garden working with some of my insect friends. And there isn't just insects. There's also annelids. What's an annelid, you say? My friend, the wiggling worms were at work in the garden too. And I got to find a few while I was digging up some weeds. So let's learn some information about our garden-friendly wiggling worms at work. Wiggling worms work. Alliteration. And this is written by Wendy Pfeiffer and illustrated by Steve Jenkins. Let's take a look at some information about wiggling worms at work. Lots of worms on here, definitely all different shapes, squirming around. And because they have no spines, these little invertebrates can pretty much bend any way they want to. Wiggling worms at work. And there's a worm face looking right at you. Down in the ground, under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As a worm twists and turns, they push aside soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels. Rainwater trickles down these tunnels. Roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. So there's one way the worms can help, is they loosen up soil for roots to be able to grow down in. And air and water can get down into the soil, something we all need. Worms tunnel in hard-packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes in the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. So basically, they're dirt munchers. Do you think you'd want to eat some dirt for lunch? Not me. No thanks. I think I'll pass. Worms do not have teeth. Muscles, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind up the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in the soil, just as you digest a salad. What's left passes through a worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. So, worm castings are like superhero pills. Nom 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 nom. Great. Sometimes worms crawl above ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too. Some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout. Worms help new plants begin to grow. So they help the soil by giving it more nutrients by dragging down dead leaf matter so that it will rot. And they drag down seeds that can then take root in the soil. Another check for the worms. Worms can wiggle, twist, and turn, and even tie themselves in knots because they have no backbone. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments. These segments act like the coils on a slinky toy. They let the worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act like little tiny legs. They help a worm move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil. The back end slinks up, making the worm short and fat. And here's a picture of the bristles on that segment that helps pull the worm through the soil. They act like teeny tiny legs. Those bristles are very strong. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, stretching and slinking. With all its wiggling, twisting, and turning, it's a wonder a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, no nose, no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations on the ground and senses a hungry robin. Quickly the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from enemies. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through their moist skin. That's like some amphibians can. In the hot sun, their skin dries up and they can't breathe. So, no sun for me. They are not sun lovers, that's for sure. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria the worms can eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one really knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp up strands of spaghetti. I would much rather slurp up spaghetti than mold. That, to me, doesn't sound too delicious at all. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. This pile of worm's casting is called a midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow. It acts like a door to keep out bad weather and rain. So those little piles, little round bowls there, those are the worm castings, and that helps close in the door. In spring, before the weather warms up, worms wiggle to the surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both a female and male, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm crawls back into its burrow. Wow. Twist together. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that has mated. Slowly the worm begins to move backwards. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just like a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over openings in the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the opening and into the cocoon. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head, just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized, so that means they'll get ready to grow. In about 3 weeks, the eggs hatch. Out of about 30 eggs, only 3 or 4 wormlets emerge from each cocoon. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread, less than an inch long, but they're fully developed worms and live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them back to their tunnels and covering any leftovers with their castings. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. So a big worm is probably going to make a big tunnel, and a wormlet's probably going to make a small tunnel. So out of an egg that has 30 worms inside it, only 3 or 4 will come out. These babies grow fast. In 6 weeks, they are adult worms. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until the spring. Then they wiggle up, tunneling and twisting and turning until they're right under your feet again. So that means we know that worms hibernate. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. Thank you, worms. You're like the bees. You help make our gardens better and produce our food much quicker. And here's some more information about worms. Wow, that was a lot of information about worms and how they live underground and eat that dirt and protect themselves. So scroll on down and find out what is your assignment with those wiggling, working worms.